So, hi everyone, it's Nina Collins, and we're here today doing a Wolfer Live with Sherry Amatenstein. Sherry is a New York City based, she's in Long Island City now, psychotherapist, author of 3 books, including The Complete Marriage Counselor, and editor of the recent anthology, How Does That Make You Feel, which I think just came out last fall from Seal Press
Couple years ago, and
a
the
couple of years ago.
subheading for that is True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch.
Okay, and I definitely would like to talk about that a little. I'm super interested in that. So you've written for a lot of publications, I think Vox, The Washington Post, The Week, Observer, and Dame. And I know Sherry vaguely through the community, through What Would Virginia Woolf Do, through Facebook, through the Wolfer. And we've often talked about me trying to get you to write a piece or something for us. And then during this COVID, during quarantine, I read a piece on Facebook a couple weeks ago about your recent diagnosis with breast cancer, which was super interesting to me in a lot of ways because I really you talk in the piece about drawing strength on your late mother and getting through this, and I thought it was really beautiful. And I'm really interested in ideas around resilience and I mean, obviously in this time, kind of how we cope with adversity and difficulty. I was just very moved by it. So I've always been kind of interested in your work. I'm interested in therapy in general, and I like other pieces you've written. But I really wanted to say hi and talk to you about your experience. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm happy to be here, and
This is
yeah,
iced tea, by the way. I'm not drinking alcohol at 3 o'clock on a Friday. It's my new discovery.
yeah, just
Nonstop
water and
red
water. Yeah,
sugar iced tea.
I'm
Yeah.
not even allowed alcohol while I'm on chemo. Oh my God.
Ugh.
Oh, yeah, one of the pains of it. But one of the message that I guess I've wanted to get out, and what that piece was about, was that it's okay to let yourself feel terrible. Like, I mean, I'm a therapist and I'm always the one who's strong and all of that. And what happened for me is in the second week in February, I just went for a routine mammogram and sonogram. And I am now a zealot in telling everyone, do not just get a mammogram,
Yeah.
get a sonogram, because my mammogram was fine. I've never had a problem. There was no cancer in my family, any of that. But the sonogram showed kind of some wonky little, maybe something,
How
under my
old are you?
armpit.
How old are you, may I ask?
Early 60s.
Okay.
So I still didn't think it was going to be anything. And I kind of call myself maybe an optimistic pessimist at best, and I was just really sort of floored when I found out that indeed it was cancer.
Yeah.
And then we found out that I also had an even tinier tumor on my breast. Um, and this was again like the second week in February, and as sort of we were starting to be a little bit nervous, but not much. Like, is COVID going to come here? Like
Yeah.
the first
Just
case in the U.S. was like the end of January, and we were still all talking about it as China, that kind of thing.
definitely. I didn't really focus on it at all till the beginning.
No, no, not really, except that I had all these tests, and having good medical help is really essential. I was really, really fortunate in that respect. So the lab that I was at, caught that, and then an MRI showed another little thing. I had a PET scan, I had all those things, and I've always, all the things that have ever happened to me physically,
Yeah.
I've done to myself.
Okay. You've broken bones. I've never
Hit
broken
by a
bones.
car, broke my, collarbone, all those things. But my body's never let me down.
That's actually a kind of interesting distinction. Like I'm because my mother died of breast cancer when I was younger.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
something that's always scared me, and I've had some, not a lot, but some health things. I've never done anything to myself. I've never broken a bone. I've never had to get stitches, really, I don't think. So it's an interesting distinction that kind
Right.
of start to expect. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like in a weird way feeling infallible, like
Yeah.
unless I'm having a klutzy day, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
That's interesting. Okay, so you felt like this will be fine. You'd never.
I did, which again surprised me that I felt that this would be fine, but I did. And then I sort of did. I really, everybody kept telling me how strong I was, and I just sort of plowed ahead. And that article was about my both my parents, and my mother especially was just an amazing fighter.
And
Uh,
your parents were
were
both alive?
Holocaust survivors. They met in New York, but they both were very young, and they were at camps and lost their families and all of those things. And my mother was always someone who she would do anything for her family, for someone she loved, and like never say never. And when I first found out that I actually had something, I just was shocked. Like I don't know if I can do this. And I'm a therapist.
Yeah.
So my job is to help people find their resources. But I sort of found mine through envisioning my mother.
Which is such a beautiful thing. And it's also, I mean, it's just helpful. We all know, of course, that therapists are people, but having that moment of like, I can't do this, I don't think
Yeah.
I can do this, is really real and honest, right? And I think it happens. I mean, I've only had those moments when my mother died, and I had that moment when I was getting divorced from the father of my 4 kids, like that feeling of like, I just don't know if I can make it through this. Um, and being able to say that to yourself and then find the resources is so important, obviously essential, and we do because we're resilient people.
But also, I feel really fortunate, and I have like an amazing support system.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, really that's a very important part, like to be able to reach out for help and to, in my case, and I'm sure a lot of us, but not everyone, was very fortunate. I was in New York City, had health insurance, even though
how,
I
how
hate them in a lot of ways.
did it work with all the COVID stuff? I mean, so you're kind of racing against the time here, right?
As I was going further and further, we started hearing more and more about COVID. I set up having a breast surgeon, and I just wanted to move forward with everything. So I kind of went from there's a little funky something mid-February to I was having surgery March 31st.
Mhm.
And
Okay,
then
March
as
31st. Okay.
as I was going, things were getting tighter. Like initially, I mean, my partner Paul could come with me. They did start giving us questionnaires like, have you been to China? Have you been
Right.
coughing? Have you been this? And then as we went forward and, things in New York got really, really scary. I
Yeah,
mean, the
I
kids
mean,
were
March
hit the
31st.
fan. Yeah.
March 31st is like when it was getting really
I
scary.
know, and that's why I'm very I really do keep in mind that I'm very fortunate with these things because I set things up and then each time I'd have to go for another test or something happened, then the first I just had to go alone. Like Paul couldn't come, my partner couldn't come with me anymore, just all these things and things got more and more sort of difficult. But having cancer, even though it was a horrible thing, it also was like, yes, you can still come. People were
Okay.
getting like elective surgeries canceled and all of those things. But I was sort of like joking. Black humor is a big thing,
You were special.
yeah, for me. Hey, yes, cancer.
I have cancer. Take
I
care of
just
me.
go through everything. I like plow through, there's no wall that can hold me. I got cancer,
And
you know.
you talked in your article about a particular moment. I think it was around March 16th when you were supposed to have the surgery sooner, and they told you it had to be postponed because of a cardiology checkup. And you said like you almost accepted it, and then you like really drew on your mother's strength.
Yeah, because then I really knew. Not everybody totally realized, but I knew if my surgery has to be delayed, I might not get it. This
Yeah,
was the day before the surgery, all the pre-tests, all the
yeah.
tests that you have before. They didn't like my yeah, they just didn't like my EKG.
Mhm.
And then they said go home and, go to your cardiologist. And I was like, and I was supposed to have the surgery literally the next day.
Yeah.
And then I almost did it. I was a mess. I was so anxious.
Were
And
you
then
alone?
I just said, my mother wouldn't stand for this. No, no, Paul was with me.
Okay, good.
He was still allowed to be with me then. It was right before.
Yeah.
That was middle of March. It was
Yeah.
right before I had to
Yeah.
start going to things alone. And I just said, I'm not leaving here. This is Mount Sinai, in New York City. They have all these complexes. I said, you have to have a cardiologist here somewhere. There's just
Very reasonable.
no way, and I said, I'm going to camp out if I have to camp out. I'm not going home, and then they found a cardiologist a couple of blocks away, and Mount Sinai has a lot of different complexes.
Yeah.
And then it's go to, insurance issues and this and all of those things. And then I finally saw her, and we'd already been there for like 6 hours at that point, and I knew my surgery wasn't going to be the next day.
Right.
But at least the cardiologist looked and she agreed with me. It was probably just my blood pressure sort of, acting up a bit, and I was probably fine, but she still said I had to get a CAT scan and um, another test, which I can say it's, chemo brain, but it's just Sherry brain that I had to have also before I could do the surgery. So that was just really a very long, awful day, but you can't give up. And the next day I was like, because I knew things were getting worse and worse in New York, and that was it. I was not going to be it. And my surgeon only did surgeries at Mount Sinai on Tuesdays.
I know it's so frustrating with these doctors that you can't.
So it's like, I don't have that many Tuesdays left,
Yeah.
to go. I was supposed to have it, I think, March 17th, whatever that Tuesday was. And so I just had to fight and fight and fight with the insurance company to have them approve the 2 tests that I needed, in the next few days. And that was, you know, nobody wants to go through that, but especially when you're going through what I was going
No,
through,
it's
it was
so
horrible.
unbearable to, I mean, I know
It
this is the
was
reality and
unbearable.
I've dealt with it as, I mean, insurance companies are the fucking worst. And then of
They
course,
are.
we're so grateful that we have insurance. I mean, lots of people don't have
I
insurance.
know, I know, I know. And then I got the test, and then, my surgeon really was great. She really was trying, and she scheduled the surgery for 2 weeks later than when I was supposed to get it originally, which was like March 16th or 17th, whatever that Tuesday was. And then she scheduled it for March 31st as an outpatient. And, and then, I mean, I was already going to tests and everything by myself.
Right. Right.
So,
It must
and
have been really
so
scary.
I had the surgery, and I felt so sorry for all the doctors, the nurses, the orderlies. They were all terrified.
Yeah, no,
You
it
know,
was
we all knew what was raging. It was very scary.
and then what happened after that? Did you kind of recover for 2 weeks and then start treatment
So
or?
my surgery was I was never concerned about the surgery. My concern was I just need to have the surgery.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had like a wonderful surgeon, and I believed her and I trusted her. And then what happened for me is that she got everything. It was really minor and contained, just on
Right.
one lymph node and just that one little lump, nowhere else. So I was, again, really very fortunate.
Great.
And we thought I was just going to do radiation. And then there was an oncologist who did like what's called, nothing I'd ever heard of, but I'd never heard of half these things, like a mammo mapping, which is one of the tests that they do from the biopsy. And then she found out that basically, even though I had, and again, I'm kind of blanking, the receptor cell cancer,
Estrogen,
it's kind of like estrogen
receptor.
related,
Yeah, it's the most common kind of cancer, I think. Breast
the most commonly diagnosed breast
cancer.
cancer. And so we really thought, go straight to radiation, you're fine, that kind of thing. But in my case, what happened was that the estrogen receptor cells were like actually throughout my body, and something could spring up. It wasn't just
I see.
localized in my breast where we thought, so it could spring up anywhere at any time, like a ticking time bomb. And
That's great.
when I lost it, really was finding out I had to have chemo.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Sherry.
Before that, I was pretty okay once I got over, oh my God, this is actually happening. I just and I kept doing patients, and not, none of them knew. I did a session with a patient the morning after my surgery. I just sort of kept going. But the chemo thing,
Yeah.
I did not expect that. And that was, And my prognosis is still wonderful.
Good. Great.
It's like 8 rounds of chemo, followed by a month of radiation and then pills. But the chemo thing really stopped me in my tracks. And I remember, I took a shower and I'm shampooing my hair, and I thought, why the fuck am I shampooing my hair? And it really got me. And I needed that because before that, I think I was just being too strong,
Uh-huh.
and I reached out to, like, I tried to get a support group, but the one that I wound up getting, and they were wonderful people, but they all had like kind of way more serious things than me. And it just kind of made me anxious to be in that support
Yeah,
group.
yeah, you have to find the right kind of people.
Yeah, you do. But I
Yeah.
started realizing I really need to let myself fall apart and
Yeah.
be okay about falling apart. And so that's kind of, now I'm just trying to get through. I have to have a COVID test the day before every chemo.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, you have to be there alone.
So
Um,
how often are you doing chemo? Once a week for
it's
8 weeks?
every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks for
So
8 sessions. So
I'm
16
going
weeks.
for my fourth session
Okay.
next
Where,
Friday, a week from today,
and where do you go? Where is it?
at Mount Sinai.
In
And
Sinai.
they're wonderful there. And the hair thing, it definitely, it was pretty traumatic.
Yeah, that sounds sudden because it's June now, so you haven't been doing it.
They really know exactly what they're talking about. They said your hair is going to start to fall out with the second chemo, and it did. Like all of a sudden, like
Uh,
huge clumps. And here I am trying to do therapy with people, virtual sessions, and not let them know. So I mean, I ordered a wig that I didn't have to wear today because we all know what I'm talking about
right,
today.
right.
That I call it Raquel. It's from the Raquel Welch line. So Raquel seems to be passing with people.
So your
And
patients don't know you've kind of
no,
kept.
I haven't disclosed. I was going to, but since Raquel seems to be passing, and
Yeah.
not that it would be a terrible thing. I mean,
No, no,
but
but I would imagine, right, you keep it about them unless there's a reason to.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's where a lot of my hair agonizing went. And then I got a suggestion from actually like a Facebook cancer group with the hair, because I was really like so stressed around the hair.
Yeah.
And then some people suggested make it, you empower yourself with it and have that be a ritual for you. And again, it's not like I could just go to a salon.
Right. No.
I mean, I am having this in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, you can't
So
go.
I'm isolated. I can't, poor Paul has to do everything, and I basically just am a princess sitting here, say yes, keep doing for me. And I feel bad, but I can't go outside. I can't do anything.
No,
And
no.
that's basically, what it is. But with the hair thing, when they suggested that, what I did, and then
What was the suggestion exactly?
basically like make it, empower yourself around it, make it your choice when you shave your head.
Yeah.
And then someone suggested making it a ritual.
Mhm.
So my hair started falling out really quickly. As
Yeah.
I said, I was hoping to get a little more, of my hair. But
Yeah.
then when I sort of tried to practice FaceTime session with Paul, and you could see, I mean, those bolts, it just wasn't going to work anymore.
Okay.
So I
So
decided, okay, doing it tonight. And so when he shaved my head, and I felt bad again, poor Paul he's going to definitely need therapy after all this is over.
how long have you guys been together?
I mean, we've known each other for like a really long time. So, in that respect, and he's just a very loving, caretakery type person. So what we did was, when he was shaving it, we played like "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman,"
Oh.
and then we danced to like another hair-oriented song, but because I have not chemo brain but Sherry brain, I can't remember what it
Oh, that's
was, the song
beautiful.
exactly. But doing that helped enormously,
That's
and
the ritual.
the
That's
hair
the ritual.
thing stopped being as upsetting then, because it is what it is. I know it will grow back,
Yep, it will.
and what can I do? I'd rather have this than have, you know,
No, and
avoid
it
kind of
reminds me of
cancer, you
it
know.
reminds me of like the reality that I mean, I just thought for a sec, I've never actually really thought about losing my hair, and that would be super,
You have beautiful hair.
super upsetting. But of course, there are all these things that we can never imagine, and then they happen, and we do them, and we just do, we do.
That's really it.
And we
I
get
mean,
benefits
I
and all.
remember years ago, I used to think, "Oh my god, if this particular thing ever
Yeah,
happens, I'll just never make it through."
totally.
But
I remember when
you
I was getting divorced, I just thought like, there's no way, and now it's like okay.
and I mean, I tell patients all the time when they're going through something that they don't feel they can get through. I
Hmm.
ask them to remember what was the last really, really tough time you went through. And then
Mm,
they'll come up with something that was just agonizing and impossible
and
at
forget.
the time. And then I'll say, "How did you do that?" And they'll say, "I don't know, I just did."
Mhm.
And I'll say, "No, how did you do that? How did you feel and what did you do and what?" And we sort of, and that's sort of what you do. And I think the more that you go through,
Yeah.
the more you realize you build that up in yourself foundationally. I can do it. I can get through.
It is definitely a kind of a perk of getting older. Like you have a little bit more confidence each time. Like I did that, I can do this. And are
Yeah.
you in therapy now
You
yourself?
know, uh, I am not. I thought about contacting my prior therapist and who I have not seen for like a while, but she was wonderful. And that's, I think I mentioned, I tried to join like a
Yeah.
support group, but it just wasn't appropriate. And I've been kind of looking for, so if anybody out there knows, I'm kind of looking for a support group of people kind of going through like what I'm going through.
Yeah. All
Because
right. Well,
I think the chemo during COVID is a very unique kind of
yeah, crazy.
circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awful to have to go by yourself every time and get
Yeah,
tested.
yeah, that's really, I mean, and I've had like the first 2 times I had these, just these wrinkles happen there, where they didn't like some of the blood work results. So we didn't know if I was gonna get it. And what turned out to was supposed to be a 5, 6 hour day turned into 12-hour days.
Oh, and then you're there alone and it's really
And
stressful.
you're there alone, and the worst is not knowing if you're gonna get it. Because now I am just totally focused on,
I'm just being treated.
I'm getting through.
Yeah.
3 down, 5 to go. And the second time that I went for the chemo, not only did I have to do the blood work, but they wanted me to get a CAT scan, because they didn't like the way my liver results were. And so I had to go out of the building to another building that's part of the Mount Sinai complex and get a CAT scan.
And how are
And
you getting
then,
around during all this? Are you driving yourself? Are you taking
well, Paul drives me and drops
all
me
drives
off,
you?
and then
Okay.
he picks me up.
Got it.
But to go through that, and then I came back from getting the CAT scan, and they were like, "Are we going to get the results in time?" Because I was initially supposed to start at like 8 or 8:30, but now, if we were lucky, we would start. They said we have to start at 2, the latest.
Right.
And the results came in at 20 after 2, and we started at that. I was okay, and we
Nice.
started at 2:30, but just like.
No, it sounds harrowing. It sounds almost
So,
like
Ativan is an answer
I again,
before I go before I go for chemo.
I'm not trying to compare your breast cancer to my divorce, but Ativan is also what got me through my divorce. So I do relate. Sometimes it's really too much and you need to just figure out how
Oh
you're
yeah, and and people a lot of women who had this before and they've all told me what to do. You definitely want to ask them for a prescription for Ativan. That was kind of like number one on everybody's hit parade.
nice.
I was like,
Okay. That's great. That's good to know. Get diagnosed with breast cancer, get Ativan. So tell us a little bit about your most recent book, because I'm super interested in stories about therapy and therapists. What made you write this book and what
oh yeah, thank you. It's an
did you tell
anthology
us?
called "How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch." And my idea for that is, I think it can be dangerous when a patient comes in, because they really, a lot of them are so vulnerable and just give their power up to you. And there are a lot of therapists out there. Most are wonderful, but there are some who really will take advantage. And plus, you just have to use your agency to find a therapist and kind of understand what the treatment is about, which is really can be even triply hard because you're vulnerable, you're in there, and then how can you judge it? And I'm not just saying for that reason, but those were a lot of my patients were coming in with like kind of horror stories about some former therapist. So that was one of the sparks, and just also
About kind of boundaries being crossed.
boundaries. And look, we're not gods.
Yeah. No, of
I
course
mean,
not.
if look, I'm even though I haven't told any of my patients, I'm being pretty public. And if somebody finds out, we'll just talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm a person like anyone else, and I have issues and all of those kinds of things. So the idea of the anthology was to have therapists and patients, none who were connected, write essays about some aspect of their experience
So
to help people
it
see
sounds
we're
great.
all human, we're all real, we're all flawed.
Yeah.
And it
I'm
was,
glad that I haven't read it. I want to read it.
yeah, no, definitely. We should.
What are some examples? Like, what did some therapists talk about?
Oh, yeah, really interesting. Well, like I wrote my piece, and again, Sherry brain, chemo brain here, whatever brain. But I mean, I kind of wrote my piece. One thing that therapists do is that, there's something called transference when the patient kind of really like identifies with you and you become the good mother, and then hopefully they begin to, become their own good mother in a lot of ways.
That's cool. Yeah.
But there can also be a lot of not great transference, but it's called countertransference, like when we kind of something about our patient sort of brings up things for us
Yeah.
about
And
our own
all the
life.
time.
So my story was kind of a bit about that, but I mean, people wrote, just extraordinary things. Like, a therapist wrote about after her husband died, she realized she couldn't be a therapist anymore. She
Why?
did wind because she was just in too much pain. She did wind up like years later, becoming a therapist again, but she knew that she just wasn't in a place where she could do it. There was a therapist who wrote just a wonderful piece called Back into the Wild about when she and a patient, a longtime patient, had their last session and what that's about,
Mm, yeah.
because we
Absolutely.
we
No,
want things.
I'm not currently in therapy, but I have a therapist who I
Yeah,
love very much. And um, yeah, it's a big deal when you leave and kind of when you
yeah,
have a therapist who's really made a difference in your life, all these things are very, very
yeah.
poignant.
And just like one patient she wrote about, some of the stories were just very funny, but one patient wrote about, her therapist died, you know.
That's horrible. I've heard stories like that. I can't even imagine. That would
Yeah, yeah.
hugely suck.
So, I mean, it sounds like it's just sort of a tearjerker, and it's not. It's a whole range of stories, but I think you just wind up seeing that we're all people, and
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds great. Have you read the Lori Gottlieb? What we talk
I
about?
love. In fact, she blurbed my book for me, which was very sweet of her. And
It's a great book.
her
Wait, what's
book
that book
is.
called again right now? It's called I Think You Should Talk to Someone. I think is what
Thank
it's
you. Yes.
That's a great book. For any listeners, you should definitely read the Lori Gottlieb.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Laura
Really,
Gottlieb
really a lot of
is,
fun.
is really fabulous, and it is a wonderful book. And again, it's all about we're people too.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we're all human, we're all flawed, we all make mistakes. If I do something, and if you're mad at me or whatever, tell me in the room, which is great because then you can bring that into your life.
Right,
Which is
right.
really
Because
kind of
we're all
what it's about. But I've had some of the most moving moments of my life in therapy sessions, and
good.
there's to me there's like nothing that equals the feeling of knowing that I've kind of helped somebody
Yeah,
see something differently.
I have a friend who just became a therapist. She's also a member of our community, and
Uh,
she went to NYU and got the MSW and has been seeing patients this year. And she said it really feels like such an enormous privilege, to be led into people's lives in that way. It's
It
very,
really is. It's a privilege and an honor and something that you really don't want to take advantage of. But it's actually helped me because I kind of haven't missed a beat. In
and
terms,
I was curious about that. You're not thinking about taking a break. You just
I
want to keep,
thought I was going to.
yeah,
And there are times I love it when it's a phone session because then I can just sort of like just lay down
Yeah,
on,
you don't have to be visual. I
I
know
can
some
have like
people.
my bald head and lay on the couch, and sometimes, if I'm feeling crappy, but
I know. I just discovered that feature on Zoom where you can actually hide the picture of yourself from you. You can hide speaker view or something, and it's kind of awesome. Um, but you don't know fully use it because then you feel like, well, maybe it's better if you can see yourself because it's just weird. I can imagine doing a phone session would be better. It's just more relaxing.
yeah, I mean, most people, I mean, I see patients at a clinic too, and now we're doing it virtually as well. And those are all on the phone. Because normally kind of joke around. I say my private patients are like normal neurotic people, like us, functional, but depressed, anxious, many self-esteem issues and serious problems and all of that. But at this clinic that I've been working at for a long time, some of these patients are or have been homeless, have been on drugs, schizophrenia, but I mean, really, most of them, some of them are mandated, and most of them also are, taking meds for psychiatrists, so they also have to see a therapist as part of being allowed to be, at the clinic. So I'm so glad that we have been continuing because people even more so now. I mean, I'm going to do some volunteer work with, don't ask me again what it's called, but part of like what the governor of New York's Cuomo started something like for to give, like, at first it was an emergency hotline, and I did the trainings for that. And then I found out I had chemo. I was going to have chemo. I was like, oh my God. And then because people like signed up for that, they were bombarded. I sort of like did the trainings like within 3 days. There were people who had done it in the first day. So they didn't need me anymore. And I was glad because once I needed chemo, it kind of felt different. But
Yeah.
now they're starting. And if anybody's in New York, you can kind of look out for this, something called coping circles, which are going to be, I think, 6 1-hour sessions with groups, either on the phone or
How
virtually.
interesting. Who's
Yeah,
who's
yeah.
doing this? The state? The city?
It's a state. It
Huh.
is a state. Yes, I can email you what it is later,
Yeah, I'd
but
love to
you
know
got
that. It's super interesting. Like
it is.
random coping circles. You could end up in a coping circle with whatever, someone in
Well,
Rochester.
some of them are going to be specialized coping circles, like for healthcare workers or people who've had losses.
Right.
Others, but I mean, this has been, I've been just really trying to help people see it's not, it's really, it's strong to admit that you need help. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
This is such a stressful, horrible time, such a
Yeah.
difficult time.
Yeah.
And it's on top of everything else that you have, like
No,
all the
yeah.
buckets full that you still have. So it's an addition to, it didn't wipe that away.
No, it really
So,
feels, I mean, hugely unprecedented, this whole thing, obviously.
yeah, I mean, and we weren't around in 1918.
Right,
So,
exactly. All
yeah.
right, so I want to kind of summarize a little bit, just a couple takeaways, which I just like to do for me that kind of help me think things through. So, one idea is that it really is okay to fall apart, which I think we know, but I think it's good to hear that.
Yeah.
Um, and that you do have to ask for help, which I think is also something we kind of know, but a lot of us don't do enough. Um, and then this idea, again, the thing that drew me to just wanting to talk to you, this idea of drawing strength on, I don't know, where we've come from or our parents, or figuring out what you can draw strength from.
Yeah.
Could be
Finding something.
something like who or what. And I don't really know what the answer for myself is. I mean, I suppose in some ways it's also my mother. Maybe for a lot of us, it's always our mothers. Um,
But
but
also, going through your divorce was an awful time for you. And the good thing about awful times is that then they're there and we know we can get through an awful time.
yeah, so maybe using the awful times as strength to get
Yeah.
through new awful times. Yeah,
Can't wait to see what I'm going to be using this one for. This awful time.
yeah. And you're in the middle of this awful time. And then my next question is kind of what for you is the worst part about getting older and what's the best part?
Um, it's a hard one to age. I've always felt, like young, and I still like normally I'm always doing stuff. Well, now I'm still doing stuff just here,
You're
but
doing
I
a
think
lot. I'm impressed.
I know, but I think for me, the good part about it is now I'm telling myself, I don't have to. I can just relax.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's kind of a new one for me. It took
Yeah.
me quite a while to let
Yeah, I think that, and that's also been a kind of interesting side effect, right, of COVID, of this kind of enforced, like we're at home and we have to. So I think everyone is taking a little bit of a different look, if we can, at the ability to pull back a little and just rest, or just say, I can take,
allow yourself to.
allow
It's like
yourself.
because look again, I have a little placard that says, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah,
Because I'm great at trying to help patients try to, treat themselves well and not always feel guilty or you have to do more, you have to give, all of that. And I've certainly been guilty of doing that to myself forever. So that's kind of one thing that I'm really working at getting from this. It's okay. I
yeah,
can just watch Frankie and Grace all day if I want.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
really okay.
Give
You
yourself
know,
permission. And these are
yeah,
things
give
we,
yourself permission.
yeah, yeah,
But it's also, you asked about the bad thing. I mean, just to kind of realize, wow, this can happen.
right.
I mean, if we were going back before all this started, we don't have it in my family. Never, ever imagine this. And then all of a sudden, not just to go through this, but during this time, and my life is basically the only time I go out is for a medical appointment. I have right now, you know, um, my immune
Yeah, you
system
have
is
compromised.
compromised. I'm going through chemo. So I can't go out at all. And now, of course, if you go out, it's not like it's a picnic because you have to
Right,
see the
right, right. But no, you're seriously restricted and really
Oh,
facing.
it's scary. I mean, every time I go for my day before COVID test, before the chemo, I'm really anxious. Even though I know I'm not doing anything, it's scary. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
in some way, when I went out to, when Paul and I went here, did I something?
yeah,
It's just,
of course.
it's scary. So I've never, the level of anxiety that I have, again, thank God I had a man. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have not had before.
yeah.
So
I'm
that's
sorry for
definitely
that.
been, when I'm faced with something that's like a little bit,
Yeah,
and I think I'm kind of getting better with that as
you
kind
will
of
over
counting
time.
off,
You have a couple more years.
counting off, the chemo sessions I have left.
And then at some point you'll look back and this will be the last really terrible thing you went through that you got through. And that's kind of the lesson, right? We keep
Yes. And that you can.
that you can.
And that I'm still like, it was my birthday last week,
Oh,
you
happy
know.
birthday.
Thanks. And I mean, I had actually, it was like a lovely birthday Zoom.
Nice.
There were like 13, 14 people, and it was really lovely.
That's great.
So because
That's really great.
it's also, I can't be with anybody now.
Right.
My sister, my heart breaks for her because she's just dying to be with me at everything and this and that. And right now, I can't be with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Where
So
is your sister? How far away is she?
she's on Long Island in Merrick, which is not super far. I mean, Long Island City is literally right outside Manhattan. I'm like
Right,
right
right.
on top of the East River, but I just, you
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, it was actually lovely. It was like a 2-hour birthday Zoom event. I had people from all around the world. I had like a friend from Germany and a really good friend from San Francisco. And it was really nice. And so I'm just trying to appreciate like what there is.
Yeah. No, it's really good to talk to you. And it's a good reminder
Ooh,
that, again, that we do, that we keep going through, as difficult as things are, we keep going, and we actually manage, and the worst things we imagine are actually surmountable.
yeah. And then you look back at it and you're like, wow, I'm really like, I am the most amazing person ever.
That's
Look what I
great.
got through.
Good
So,
for you. That's great. Well, Sherry, thank you so much. And hold
ooh,
up your book one more time so people
okay,
can see
sure.
it. 'Cause it sounds really interesting. So how does that make you feel? Okay.
Do confessions from both sides of the therapy couch. And I will also hold up my loyal companion,
Oh my
Shay.
God. Okay, she actually kind of looks like a stuffed animal. She was so quiet the whole time. She didn't talk. She didn't do
Yeah,
anything.
he's like a terrier Yorkie Schnauzer, a rescue. So yeah,
Super
he's
cute.
there.
He just blinked. All right. Well, I really wish you the best of health and good luck getting through all of this, and happy birthday. And thank you for talking to us. It's really
Thanks for
very
having me. Yeah,
inspiring and helpful. I really appreciate it.
sure.
Yeah. Okay.